While Peppa was a part of the childhood of millions of people, it's also true that the cartoon hides a bunch of strange theories. And one of the most famous suggests that Evie is the second child of the pig couple, not the third. Is there any truth to this? Many people believe that George's first appearance was in that special episode called Peppa is Having a Baby. But if we look closely, some things don't add up. In that episode, the pig family is watching old videos from the time when Peppa was much younger than the version we know today. And since she doesn't remember anything she's watching, we can assume that in that recording, she must have been around 2 years old. That makes sense, since almost nobody has memories from when they were a baby or younger than 2 years old. The problem is, Peppa is currently 4 years old and George is 18 months. In other words, if that baby in Mummy Pig's belly really was George, the age difference between them wouldn't be so big. She would be at most about 3.5 years old now, not 4. Another important detail, Mummy Pig's belly in that video seems to be at the very end of pregnancy. Very similar in size to Mummy Rabbit's when she had the twins Rose and Rob. This reinforces the idea that she was about to give birth. But if that's true, and Peppa really was 2 years old at the time between the video and the baby's birth would be very short. That leaves room for a heavy theory. What if Mummy Pig's baby didn't survive? Heartbroken, Daddy Pig would have gone to an orphanage and found a 6-month-old piglet. That way, he and Mummy Pig would have adopted George, raising him as if he were their biological son. And since both he and Peppa were still very young, neither of them would remember anything. But the most curious part is that, even without conscious memories, it seems that George carries traces of his old family in his subconscious. And that's where things start to get really interesting. After digging through more than 300 episodes, we found clues that answer this question. And we even discovered George's real last name, which, spoiler alert, is not Pig. So get your heart ready. Subscribe to the channel and come with us, because another episode of Zigzag is starting now. One of the clues that George might not have been born into the pig family appears in the episode International Day. In it, all the children at Madame Gazelle's school are representing different countries. And among them, George shows up dressed as a typical Russian Cossack, complete with traditional clothing and even a fur hat that looked absolutely perfect. But the curious detail comes during the presentations. Each child goes up front to say which country they're representing. But George just appears smiling, and in a slightly different way. You could think he stayed quiet because he still doesn't know how to speak. But that theory falls apart seconds later, when Madame Gazelle asks if everyone knows the song they're going to sing. We can clearly see George responding, moving his mouth and saying words. Right after that, he sings along with everyone just fine. So another theory comes up. Could it be that George avoids speaking alone because he's embarrassed by his accent? When singing in a group, his voice blends in with the others, which might make him feel more comfortable. Maybe he's afraid of being made fun of by the other kids for speaking differently. If that's true, it could mean that George really did come from somewhere else, possibly Russia, and was adopted as a baby. That would explain not only the Russian outfit, but also the fact that he's quieter and more reserved. And maybe even the reason why he doesn't have the same last name Pig as the rest of the family. Who knows? Maybe that's just another little detail that reveals the true origin of the little piglet. A lot of people who support the theory that George was adopted often use as an argument the fact that Peppa's full name has always been shown as Peppa Pig. Several characters call her that all the time. But in the case of her younger brother, it's extremely rare for anyone to refer to him as George Pig. And the same goes for the parents. Both Daddy and Mummy are always mentioned with the last name Pig. So the question remains, does George not have that last name too? And if he doesn't, what would his real last name be? As we mentioned before, we went on a marathon through the episodes to try to find some clue. And in fact, up to a certain point in the series, the show never mentions George's last name directly. The only time this happens is in the episode about Edmund Elephant's birthday. In this episode, Edmund's family sends a telegram inviting George to the party. And in it, the piglet's name appears written out, George Pig. But here's the thing. Could it be that the little elephant's family just assumed that George's last name was also Pig? After all, no one in his own family has ever called him that. There's never been a George Pig from Mummy or Daddy. If the theory is right and he's from another country, maybe the Pig family kept his first name and only gave him their last name out of convenience. But even so, his original last name could still exist. And when we do a quick search, we find out that the word pig in Russian can be translated as something like Svenja. So could George's real name be George Svenja? Man, this theory has a lot of layers, huh? What do you think? Comment down below with the hashtag George so we know you're enjoying it. Still within this discussion about last names, there's a pattern that shows up all the time in the Peppa Pig universe that many people end up not noticing. Almost all the children have names where the first letter of the name matches the first letter of the last name, which, deep down, is the species of the character. Taking Edmund as an example, his last name is Elephant. And the same goes for his sister, Emily Elephant. Both start with E. Peppa herself follows this same pattern, since Pig also starts with the letter P, just like the twins Pandora and Peggy Panda. If we go further, we can see the same scheme working in the Rabbit family. The younger ones, Rose and Rob, and the older ones, Rebecca and Richard. All of them have the last name Rabbit in the original. We can also mention Candy Cat, Susie Sheep, and Danny Dog, all with names and species starting with the same letter. Even Madame Gazelle fits this, even though her first name has never been officially revealed. Her sisters call her Gigi, which reinforces this logic of initials. Then comes George. If his real name is George Pig, that completely breaks the pattern, because the letters don't match. G in the name, P in the last name. If he were really the biological child of the Pig family, following the pattern, it would be more natural for him to have a name starting with P too, like Paul, Patrick, or even Perry, which might suggest that he already had that name when he joined the family, further fueling the adoption theory. Of course, there are also exceptions. Peppa's cousins, for example, are named Chloe and Alexander, and don't follow this rule of initials. Aunt Dottie also breaks the logic. That shows it's not an absolute rule in the show, but it's still a curious detail that raises questions. And the mystery doesn't stop there. A lot of people believe that even George's favorite toy might be related to the character's true origin, and we're going to reveal that mystery to you now. But first, how about subscribing to the channel? It took a lot of work to research all this, and your subscription helps us a lot. Everyone already knows that George's favorite toy is that green dinosaur, right? In one episode, he ends up breaking the toy from playing with it so much, and then the Pig family starts a quest to try to find another one just like it. They even visit Mr. Fox's shop, where they find a different dinosaur. But it's a robotic model, very different from the one George had. The curious thing is, if this toy is so beloved and popular, why is it so hard to find another one just like it in stores? One of the most interesting theories is that the original dinosaur isn't British, but from another country. The same country George might have come from if he was actually adopted. And that's why the toy would be so important to him. Besides being his favorite, it would also be the only keepsake from his original family. This would also explain why he never wanted to part with the toy, and why Daddy Pig had to fix the original instead of buying a new one. This theory would be perfect, if it weren't for one detail. In the episode Babies, we clearly see Granny Pig giving George the dinosaur when he was still a little baby in Mummy Pig's arms. That reveals where the toy came from and weakens that other mysterious explanation. Even so, the question about George's origin remains. There are signs that he is the biological son of the pig couple, but there are also clues that support the idea of a possible adoption. The story of the dinosaur just adds another layer to this whole mystery. Man, I really don't know what to think. What do you make of all this?